These are some of the paints I found in my studio. There's acrylic, there's a Liquitex, Golden, System 3, Lascaux, Golden Fluids, Sennelier's Abstract, and some high flow ink. Wow, okay, quite a lot. And I'm going to be testing those physically so that you can see how quick or not, or what consistency they are, all right? So hold on for that one. But before I do that, I'm going to go on to showing you, if you have an acrylic, how you can make it a slow drying acrylic. The heavy gel is thicker than the Golden Open. I think you can probably see from that photograph. The fluid retarder, which you probably can't really see it very well, it's like a puddle of clear stuff. Okay, it's a liquid, creamy, watery solution, a bit like single cream, that you mix with paint to slow the drying time. It retards it. Obviously, because the heavy gel is thick, the theory being, if you mix those two together, you're going to get a regular consistency. Now, the heavy gel is what I use to stick my paper onto panels. So if you do that, you may have some. In the middle is System 3's textile medium, which, as you can tell by its puddle, is a more fluid medium, but it is designed to make an acrylic paint on a 50-50 basis, and we're going to work on a 50-50 basis as a control. You can go more or less, but it's designed to make it a slow drying, so that if you're pushing it through a screen for screen printing, for example, or if you're painting onto fabric, you've got a longer drying time. The third one is the Golden Open Gel, which you can buy in matte or gloss as a tub, 350ml tub. I strongly suggest you, if you're buying it, get the gloss. If you use the matte, after a lot of layers, and depending how many layers you're going to use, it can go a little foggy. Okay, it's not 100% transparent. Okay, so I'm going to move over to my workbench and I'm going to show you how I tested these. Okay, a bit of testing. Sometimes it's really useful to do this, and I'm aware that you have lots of different stuff, and I have lots of stuff, so it's worth me doing it for you if it can save you buying anything that you don't need. So this is the first one. This is the heavy gel. Okay, it's what I use to glue my paper onto my panels. It's very stiff, and this is heavy body, straight green gold heavy body paint. Okay, I'm adding to this. Now this isn't slow drying, so if I mix those together, all I'm doing is getting a stiffer paint. So because it's stiffer, I'm going to put some fluid retarder in, about 50-50 I think I'm doing. I've never done this before, this is all new. It's a bit weird to mix, it's going a bit stringy, but we'll roll with it, because what the retarder is going to do is slow down the drying time. Right, and then I'm going to mix that in a 50-50 to the paint. It is a bit stringy, but it's okay. It has changed. Now it's changed the colour slightly because the gels are white, but they dry clear. So this will dry darker. Bear that in mind. Okay. Okay, here we go. I've got 2 plates. So this one I'm going to put the open green gold on, and this one I'm going to put my mix on. Right, straight away you should be able to see a slight difference in colour. I don't think that's going to be too bad. A lot of that is probably because, remember, this is a very transparent colour, but we have to take that on the chin. Right. Let's see how different it is. It's okay, it's rolling out nicely. Slightly paler on this one. Because remember what we've kind of done is diluted the colour somewhat. Probably the best way of testing this is not to do any marks on this, but just to take a print. It rolled out quite easily. It certainly didn't feel sticky. It's tackier, okay, so there's a little bit more texture there. Once it's printed, actually the colour's fairly even. Yeah. What I'm trying to test though is how long I've got for drying time, and I don't want to spend the whole of this session concentrating on that. Okay, but we'll have a little play just to see. I think probably the thing to do, I'm going to mark these. And towards the end of the session, I'll come back and just feel the paper. That's going to be the best way of testing it. Okay, so this was heavy body and heavy gel and retarder, and this is our what do you call it? I can't remember now. A control. This is our control. Okay, so that's the open. All right, and that's the heavy body with the heavy gel and retarder. And then at the end of the session, I'll come back and I'll give you some indication about how dry the paper is. Obviously, ideally, you'd spend some time to see what your working time is. Now, this is still quite wet, okay? And what I'm going to do now with the same board is test the textile medium. This is System 3 textile medium. You wouldn't believe the behind the scenes mess in here is absolutely incredible. Here we go. Right, okay. So this is a textile medium. It's much more fluid, okay? You can see how much more fluid it is. I'm going to mix it with the heavy body. I have used this before. It is a bit more slippery. I've used it for obvious reasons. It's actually probably the best thing to use with textiles, but I've used it when I've run out of anything else. Can you see that? There we go. It's more slippery. I'm trying to get a 50-50 mix going. Oops, sticking. I'm going to whack it down on there. Clean roller. Right, again with my green gold, just so that I can feel how, not to print it necessarily, but to see, so that you can see how differently it rolls out. So that's the green gold. Whoops. This is it's much more slippery. It's not a problem, okay? But it should be, in theory, it should be slower drying than if I just use straight heavy body, which I will do a quick test of that. All right, so I'm not going to bother with that one, but I'm going to take a piece of paper on that one. I'm going to work through these quite quickly because obviously the drying time is going to be affected by, I'm going to add, a minute on for each one for the drying times. You can see on this, I don't know if you can, how I've got tide marks around the edges where it's looser, okay? It may be the situation where if you're using this, put it on your palette, just let it dry a little, let some of that water evaporate. It shouldn't actually make too much difference to the drying times if you just kind of meet it halfway and find what I call its sweet point. So this is heavy body and textile medium. That goes on the floor by my feet. Let's wipe this one off. So at this point, at some point, I lost the sound, so I'm having to dub this next short bit of the section. Apologies for that, but hey, I'm testing my editing skills, something chronic here. So we're about to test what happens when you mix the golden open gel with a heavy body, okay? And so this is the golden open gel. It comes in smaller tubs. I buy big tubs because I use a lot of it. And that's the gloss gel. As I said before, the matte gel can be a little bit foggy if you use it with lots of transparent layers. I'm mixing again a 50-50 mix. And it is slightly different in consistency when you mix it than the golden gel in the tube is. Okay, but it certainly does. It's a quick way of reducing the drying time. Worth saying at this point that these can be intermixed, so you could mix some heavy body with some golden open paint and accelerate the drying time. So all these things are mixable together. It's a question of experimenting, really. This is my 50-50 mix going down. I apologise that this video keeps going in and out of focus. It's still a learning curve. So nice clean roller. So I'm just showing, here we go. So on one side you've got your golden open, and this side is the heavy body with the open gel. Okay. Dubbing's really difficult because I've got no idea what I said. So my hands are going around all over the place. I did think about re-recording this bit, but I was kind of running out of time. I'm sure you're finding all this very amusing, and I'm certainly learning a lot. There we go. So that's the heavy body paint with the golden open gel. It's slightly softer, a little bit squidgier. You did get a few tide marks going. But it's and so what I'll do at the end is do a comparative photograph thing and also show you how different they are in terms of their drying times. So finally, what I want to do is a straight test with the golden open and a heavy body, just so that you can see the differences between the two, because they look the same but they do behave very differently. So to get the plates nice and clean, so this test can be a good straightforward one. Again, cleaning the rollers. You don't have to keep rewashing that cloth in the roller cleaner bit. It's quite forgiving. Just give it a squidge about. I put a little bit of washing up liquid in there just to help it along, and then wipe it on a dry towel. I cannot begin to tell you the technical difficulties I've had doing these videos. Things keep dropping on me, but it's okay. So it has this, when you roll it out, it's the same consistency. It's fine. It feels very similar to a heavy body, and that's the whole point. That Golden's designed a slow drying paint to have the same consistency as a heavy body. It, as I've said before, I might not have done, it's not designed to be painted with extremely impasto. The chemistry within it doesn't really like that. Okay, so but it's lovely to do with portrait painting, plein air painting, You've got a much longer working time. So they are the two paints side by side, and I'm going to pick up one of my little tools and we'll have a bit of a play with it and see what happens when we do a print and a ghost print as it is. I think what I'm saying there is if you're using a heavy body, it will dry quicker on your roller. So you have to make sure you don't leave your rollers lying around. And that applies to all of the paints that don't have any retarders in. And cleaning the plate quicker. There we go. I'm finding these tools much softer than the Catalyst ones. They're much more rubbery. The Catalyst version, same shape, are a stiffer thing, but they still do the same thing. So you've still got working time, okay? And the working time, you've got plenty of time with these certainly, a straightforward paint. You haven't got to rush and don't panic about it. It does very much depend on your climate though. How warm your room is, what part of the world you're in. It wipes away the same, it makes marks the same. So there's really, the difference really isn't in that, in terms of the workability of it. So that's the first print with the golden open. That's green gold, just to remind you what the colour is. It's one of my favourite colours. It makes a delicious grey as well. And that's the first print with the heavy body. And there's really not much difference, although it is slightly harder to pull the heavy body off because it is beginning to dry off. We're not using it very thick, and acrylics dry quickly. So the open is allowing me to get a second, and you could have maybe got in there for a third ghost print, but what I get from the heavy body is pretty much nothing. All right, it's dried on the plate and not giving me a ghost. But if you're just wanting to do one layer and not worry about a ghost print, then your heavy body's fine and good to go. Okay, that really isn't a problem. It will make your plate a little bit harder to clean. Okay, but you'll get that. The hand test is always a good one. Okay, I'm getting a mucky hand from the golden open because that is still wet. There's nothing coming off on my hand with the heavy body. It's dried on the plate. Okay, I hope that helps. Sorry about the technical glitch, but we kind of got there in the end. And next I'm going to demonstrate some of the paints and how differently they work. Okay, what I want to test now is the different ranges of paints you might have around available, because they all have different consistencies and they have different drying times. I have never tested these, and this is an ideal opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have them all the same colour, so there are different drying times for different colours, etc., etc. As a rule of thumb, the blues dry quicker than the reds, but we can't worry about that today. So I've got a range of them, and I'm going to do two at a time, and I'm going to do a print and a ghost print with each one to see the consistency of it on the plate, and to see how quickly or not the plate dries, okay, or the paint dries. I'm trying to be as scientific as possible in this very small space. So we're going to start off with this is a Liquitex soft body, professional range, and you will notice that it's soft. Okay, can you see? Can you get the idea of that? If I put the palette knife, look, you can see how soft that is. So that's a Liquitex soft body. None of these are slow drying paints. The only one is the golden, and this is the De La Rowney System 3, beautiful delicious orange. that I bought incidentally after going on one of Lewis Noble's workshops. It's one of his favourite, what he calls punch colours. So let's see how this works. This is really squidgy. Okay, it's a delicious colour. It's a nice opaque colour. But look, you can see what my roller can do. My roller can literally roll and skid around a bit, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It depends on what you're wanting. Just get that hair out of there. Excuse my mucky hands. Okay, so that's the Liquitex. I'm just going to clean it off the edge of this one so I don't get any whatever. Okay, this is that, and that's what you can see straight away. There's what we call a tack. It's much tackier. Move that out of the way. There's much more. That feels much more like a heavy body paint. Okay, so that's pretty much what you expect to get, and that's a System 3. I'm going to do a little bit of a squidge in these just so you can see how the paint moves around. And again here. Using smaller paper just to try and save paper. So that's a 1. And you can see with a wet paint, you're going to get kind of what I call tide marks, but that's a delicious paint. Let's see whether it lets me do a ghost. That's okay. Not as good a ghost as I would expect with something with a retarder in. Okay, it's drying quickly on the plate now, so it's not letting go. It's only going to let go when it's wet. Okay, let's go for the System 3. Nice, liking that. Okay. And again, I don't think, I can see it's taken a lot of the paint off. I don't think I'm going to get much more out of that, if anything. A little, okay, a little. But if you're just wanting to do one layer and you're working fairly quickly, experiment with what you have, please, because I think these guys are going to be, they're going to be fine. The only reason I don't use any of these is because I only use the Golden Open when I'm teaching workshops. But you need to work with what you have. Okay, another test is going to be see how easy it is to clean it off. That's okay. You'll find the ones that don't have retarders in can be a little bit stubborn because they're drying. Okay. Good to go. Paper towel on there. Make sure we're dry. Rollers. Again, with the slower drying acrylics, whether that's open or one you've mixed with a retarder of some kind, your rollers, if you're not using those, your rollers are going to dry much quicker. This is already getting sticky on here. It's harder to clean off. But as long as you're aware of that, that's fine. Okay. Let's go for this. So this is the Lascaux. This is Lascaux Studio. I use this sometimes if I'm ever doing screen printing. Again, that's a really fluid. It's quite a fluid, soft paint. These ones are particularly nice. These are by Sennelier. They come in these pouches and they do a bigger one. I have a student of mine who has quite bad arthritis in her hands and she finds it really hard to squeeze the tubes, but she can hold this. Okay, because it just comes out like that. Again, it's quite soft. It's not as soft as that one. They also make a range of nozzles for these, which are rather fun. So you can squeeze out 3 lines and things. Okay, they're good. Be careful though. I took these on a plein air painting trip once with some heavy body tubes, and one of these sharp corners pierced it all over the show. Oh my. Can't tell you how much of a mess that was. Okay, let's do this in order. So this is my Lascaux. Nice colour. Loving that colour. Lascaux also make a delicious range of gouache in those similar bottles. That's nice. Liking that. And this is my Sennelier. that's rolling out as I'd expect it to. That's rolling out very much like a heavy body, despite it being in a pouch. That's interesting. I've not thought about the differences in the consistency of those. It's not as wet as the Lascaux. Let's do our control test. Okay, and let's go in with our papers. A lot of this is going to depend on the humidity of where you're working. You really have to take that into account. Oh, that's sticking to the plate. In fact, it's lifting the plate. Okay, so that's really quickly drying. And I'll be really surprised if I get much of a ghost. Nothing, look, nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. That's so interesting. This is the Sennelier. That's nice. And that's left a lot of paint. Okay. Well, let's go for a ghost on that one. I will put all these photographs and label them on the website, okay, so you've got something to refer to. Yeah, that's a respectable ghost. That's really interesting. I would say that's not quite as slow drying as the Golden Open, but it's certainly more slow drying than a straight heavy body paint, okay. You could often get these on offer, and they're way cheaper. So that is a great contender. Let's have a look at the cleaning. I just know this is going to be, look how hard. Yeah, okay. I don't recommend the Lascaux. Now, in terms of recommendation, we need to be really careful here, okay? All these guys are designed to be used as paints with brushes. None of them are designed to be used as printing inks, okay? So whilst I say I don't recommend it, doesn't mean it's not a great paint. It's just not good for what we want it for. So I'm hoping I don't get anyone who works for Lascaux having a go at me. It just isn't suitable for our purposes, but we're trying to use it for a purpose that it isn't designed for. Okay, so worth bearing that in mind. But that was informative on a lot of levels. The last two, and I'll come up with some kind of conclusion. And I'm just looking at this roller in the knowledge that, look, oh my, that must have some real fast dryers in it. Goodness. So if you're wanting a quick drying acrylic, Lascaux's your beast. Beautiful colour though, and beautiful range of colours. It's fine. Finally got that off. If I'd left that any longer, I would have to have given that a good scrub in the sink, or isopropyl alcohol will get dried on acrylic off. It's worth bearing in mind. In England, we often call that rubbing alcohol. So this is the golden fluid. Interestingly, as a rough rule of thumb, not a precise science, a tube of heavy body is 60 ml. So it's about half of this, which is 30 ml, and the other half is made of the soft gel to make it that gunky consistency. I really like the fluids, and I personally, if I'm using acrylics, I mix the fluids with paste and gels to get the consistency I want. Okay, it's a fluid, all right? It's as loose as the Lascaux we were looking at, if not a little looser. This is a golden high flow acrylic ink. There are other acrylic inks. Acrylic inks, by their very nature, are designed to be slow drying. You wouldn't want to dip it in a dip pen and have it dry on your pen before you even hit the paper. But they are very fluid. They're inks, okay? So it'd be interesting to see how that rolls. But they're worth playing with. Okay, and these are all of these are intermixable. Okay, so you haven't, there's no worry about different brands. The only brand I wouldn't necessarily include in this mix, and it's not because it's not a great paint, but there's a make called Atelier who do a water mixable acrylic. And I don't understand the science of it, so I tend to avoid it. It's probably fantastic, but I don't know how it works. The idea being that you can wake it up again if you get it wet. Okay, so this is the fluid. A lot of people use these, and a friend of mine in Holland, Marguerite, I'm sure she's watching, she uses this on her Gelli a lot. It's great for those single paintings. If you're just painting on your Gelli, like a alla prima, really. But it's rolled out. It's quite slippery. Okay, it's not too slippery, but it's quite slippery. And again, we could mix that with the gel if you want to make it thicker. This is the ink, which is super slippery. Okay, this is my wild card, just because I wasn't sure what it would do. Whoa. Yeah. Probably too much on there as well. I'll get that off. Okay, let's see what these can do. If I find my tool. It's getting a bit mucky. Apologise. It's nice. The fluids are nice. It goes down very thin, as in it's a thin layer. You're not going to get a gunky layer by the very nature of the paint. This is extremely wet. Okay, I could do lots in that one. Really wet. And by its very nature, that has a retarder in to slow down the drying. You can make an interesting acrylic ink if you have something called airbrush medium and mix it with your acrylic paints to loosen it. Airbrush medium has retarders in it, but it's as thin as water. Okay, so that's my fluid. Oh, it is sticking. Ping. And that's the ghost. I don't think I'm going to get much of a ghost out of that. No, hardly anything. Okay, and then that's going to be a mess to dry. I'm actually going to put this in the water tub before it sits on completely. And this is my inks. These are called high flow, highly pigmented. I use the black a lot instead of using Indian ink. That's nice. Because it's an ink, you're going to get a kind of splodgy, furry line. Can you see? It's not a straight line. It's bleeding. You get bleed. This is going to be an interesting print. So I think it's, in terms of like trying to find different textures, it's certainly worth exploring. Yeah, that's a nice grungy print, even though it's a bit bleedy. But that has let go of a considerable amount of paint. Okay, it's because this has a retarder in it. It's a slow drying, thin paint, for want of a better word. The fluid has dried on quite heavily, and that's quite a scrub, having to get that off. But this is it's still quite wet around the edges. That's all right. That's okay. Okay, I will clean all that lot up later. Okay, let's have a little bit of a look at our tests we did with the gels and pastes and fluids to change the drying time of our straight green gold. Okay, remember this is our green gold open. Here it is, okay, which has a 10 times drying time. This one we mixed the heavy body with the heavy gel and some of the retarder, which was an idea that came through one of the questions, and thank you for that. I really hadn't thought of that. I quite like that idea. This was mixed with the heavy body and the textile medium, and this one was mixed with the heavy body and the open gel, which I've got a large tub of it, but it's on the floor. On the whole, as I was every now and again, I'd go and give them a bit of a touch. On the whole, they all took around the same amount of time to dry. They all took around 3-4 minutes to dry, okay, as in to be what I call touch dry, and pretty regular across the board. The only difference I would say is there's a difference in consistency and a difference in tack. So whereas the open, you tend not to get any tack or any texture. Once you start mixing the paints together, it's a little bit sticky. Even the open gel, okay, isn't the same isn't the same consistency as using a tube of open, mixing the open gel with the heavy body. It is slightly wetter. Yeah. In terms of colour, I can see no difference whatsoever. So even though the gels and the paste are white, they dry clear. So our true green gold colour has come through. All right. So I would say if you've got a straight one of these and you're wanting to slow the drying time, any of these permutations are perfect. All right, good to go. Finally, on that one, I did a straight test between the open and the heavy body. And again, on a first print, done relatively quickly, no difference whatsoever. What you don't get with the straight heavy body is you don't get a ghost print, and you have to be a little bit sharper in terms of cleaning your roller and your plate. But I think that's fairly obvious. All right, so that's fairly good to go. In terms of all the ones I tested, the winner in terms of slow drying time was the Sennelier Abstract. I was really surprised by this. It's slightly more fluid, I think, than the open, but I got a very good ghost out of it, and it was easy to clean up. Okay, so hopefully that's helped you, that wee test. It certainly helped me. Thank you.